Hi everyone, welcome to the State TA Day webinar. Can you guys confirm that you can hear my voice and see my screen? Thank you, Michelle. So everyone, this is Monica Carr. I'm here with Karen, and we're kind of our team spread out throughout the state today because of the ERS training. So we have a few people in Denver, some people at the office, some off site. Karen and I are in a sound booth out in Dolores, Colorado. So just bear with us. The technology seems to be working this far. But yeah, so let us know if you can't hear us, the screen goes blank or whatnot. We are going to try something. I guess it's not new. We tried it our last webinar. We want to make these webinars more interactive and let you guys ask questions and have more of a conversation. So same as last time when Stacy presented, we will have everyone unmuted. So we'll ask that you guys mute yourselves until you have a question or something to say, then you can unmute yourself. And that way we can avoid background noise when people are presenting. You can, if for some reason you think you're not being heard, you can always type in the chat box too, and we will figure out the technical difficulties that people are experiencing. So the first person on our agenda today is Elizabeth Navarez from the Colorado Shines Child Care Resource and Referral Call Center. Let me just make sure Elizabeth has joined us already. Elizabeth, are you there? Okay. I don't think Elizabeth's on our call yet, so for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and move right along just to some updates that we have for you. So just a reminder that your evaluation of the strategic plan is due July 31st. You can send that to your QRS coordinator. If you need an extension, just reach out to your QRS coordinator, let us know. But we do want we need those for the triennial report evaluation. So we might be able to give you a few days extension, but it can't be like last year. So really try to get those in on time. As I mentioned, we've started the ERS3 retooling. So this week we started our first training in Dolores and then in Denver. We are canceling the training in Alamosa. But go ahead and mute yourself while someone's presenting. So as I mentioned, we're doing the ERS3 retooling. The Alamosa training is canceled. We didn't have enough people sign up. So what we'll do is we're going to add another Denver training. So right now there's 4 trainings out of Denver. If your coaches haven't signed up, please have them sign up. If they're not credentialed, have them sign up anyway, then maybe we can waitlist them. If you know of someone that really wants to take the training, have them try to sign up. If there's room, they can possibly attend. And then just real quick, our next webinar is going to be on August 22nd. Does anyone have any questions about the updates or announcements or the ERS3 retooling? Okay, we'll move right along. Lindsay Dorman's here with us today. She is the Preschool Development Grant Director, and she's going to give us an update. Lindsay, are you here with us, or do you need to be unmuted?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Great. I can hear you. Do you need the screen?
I do, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So are you seeing the Colorado Shines?
We can see your screen.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everybody for the time on the agenda today to give an update on our state's preschool development grant. Just a reminder of some of the goals and outcomes we hope to achieve through the grant. Ultimately, we want to ensure that children are ready for school when entering kindergarten. And to do that, we plan to find ways to help families find quality programs of their choice, focusing on families who are vulnerable and those that have infants and toddlers. We want to enrich informal care environments, so provide resources and tools for parents and other licensed exempt or unlicensed caregivers to make sure that they're supporting a child's development in that setting. And finally, we want to find ways to better align and coordinate the state system so that we're able to maximize access to resources and really leverage what we have to reinforce positive relationships among parents, caregivers, and children. So we have kind of been in a mode of hurry up and wait with the grant, and so we are now experiencing a little bit of hurry up as we've been able to release all of our contracts. So every activity that we've committed to within the preschool development grant, we now have vendors under contract or staff in place who are completing those activities. As you see, during the first 6 months of the grant, we really focused on building some infrastructure, especially as we think about supporting our needs assessment and strategic plan. And so in June, we were able to kick off those activities with our vendors, and I'll get into those details in a little bit. But we were able to start really planning a robust engagement and outreach strategy to be able to reach everybody that we've defined as falling within the early care and education system or being served by that system. So as we wrap up July, we are just completing some of the first focus groups as well as releasing some of the initial surveys that will inform both the needs assessment and strategic plan. In September, we expect to see the funding opportunity announcement for the renewal grant. They are anticipating of the 45 states and territories that were awarded in year one, that 23 will receive a renewal grant. Those grants will start at $5 million a year and cap out at $15 million per year. And they will have a 30% match. And so a lot of Colorado's commitment or application will be based on our ability to identify match, as well as understanding the true cost of the activities that we're committed to. In October is when our partners will see and hear about those initial findings from the needs.
Just a reminder, hold on one sec, Lindsay. Just a reminder, we have unmuted everyone. That way you guys can participate in the conversation. So make sure you mute yourself unless you have a question. Okay, go ahead, Lindsay.
Thank you. So in October, we'll start releasing some of those initial findings from our needs assessment. By that point, we'll have wrapped up the first and second round of focus groups. We'll have wrapped up our first family survey as well as our first provider survey. And so we'll be able to share some of those themes that we discovered. At that point as well, we'll also be able to share a framework for the 5-year strategic plan. Those activities will be finalized in December, and so in January or February, we'll be disseminating the strategic plan as well as the needs assessment report pretty broadly, and hopefully at that point, we'll have additional funding so that we can start implementing those activities underneath PDG. Okay. So now that we are basically in it for the needs assessment strategic plan, I just want to run through again the purpose of those activities and the framework that we're operating under to be able to complete these within the next 4 to 6 months. So the needs assessment requirement is really to develop a rationale for a strategic plan, to think about areas in the state that we can strengthen to maximize access to programs and services. And it's really looking at the infrastructure and the programs and services that currently exist in Colorado within that early childhood care and education system. So our needs assessment will be addressing 3 topics to try to get at those bigger questions. And I apologize, there's some construction happening. Sorry about that. So we'll be addressing 5 guiding questions, which look at what we have, what families need, and for that we'll really be emphasizing family and parent voice, where we have it and where we don't, who needs it and who doesn't have it, and then the barriers to achieving that ability to offer service. And so we'll be looking at early care and learning needs for families, other service needs for families, and services for childcare providers. Within that 3rd bullet specifically, we'll be addressing some of the business supports that providers need to be able to operate, as well as the developmental supports or other services that both formal and informal care providers would need to support a child's development. To complete the needs assessment, we partnered with the Colorado Health Institute. Any questions about that activity? Yes. So the strategic plan is designed to be very responsive to whatever we learn in the needs assessment. And we're excited about that linkage because we hope some innovative ideas, some perhaps missed opportunities from the past surface through that needs assessment and give us a chance to think differently about our services and how we can connect families and engage them in the system. Ultimately, the strategic plan is designed to leverage existing funding, whether that be federal, state, local funding, existing programming, and that system that we currently have to maximize access and engagement. Additionally, the strategic plan wants us to look at kindergarten transitions. And so while we recognize that there's a multitude of transitions across that 0 to 5 age span, the one that we have been directed to focus on and that we as a state felt we had the capacity to focus on in year 1 is really that kinder entry transition. And so we'll be working with the P3 office in Colorado as well as some technical assistance folks to help us in that thinking around transitions. Child Trends is our partner in developing the strategic plan, and they're partnering with 2 local agencies. Marzano Research will be doing family outreach, so they'll be doing some additional surveying and focus groups with families to talk about proposed strategies and make sure that those are a good fit, that they resonate with our populations. Early Milestones Colorado will be doing similar work, but they'll be looking at the provider stakeholder populations. So anyone that's not a family. Questions on this activity? Okay. And then the 3rd deliverable that we launched in June that we're focusing on is our evaluation plan. And so we'll be working with the Butler Institute at University of Denver to conduct evaluation around the process, costs, and the outcomes of the strategies within the strategic plan. And so once we're able to start moving on those activities, this evaluation plan will be really important to make sure that we're measuring towards those outcomes we identified earlier. Another part of the evaluation plan is to identify gaps in our data. And so understanding better as a state, if we want to measure for certain outcomes, what do we have to be able to do that and what do we don't? And then what steps do we need to take to be able to develop mechanisms or tools to be able to capture that data? And so that'll be a really interesting aspect of this work. And so we're excited to see what Butler comes up with. Questions on that? Okay. So when we think about the scope of the grant, we identified 2 key populations. So that's families and providers. And within the Every Student Succeeds Act legislation, which PDG is found within, using the funding announcement as well as definitions that are used in Colorado, we came up with the framework for identifying the populations and understanding who we need to reach in Colorado. So under families, you see a lot of categories. We understand people don't fit neatly into these, but by identifying these characteristics, we feel like we'll have a really great representation of those that we feel are perhaps underserved or vulnerable within Colorado, who we really want to understand their needs. In providers, this is a fairly broad category, so we're looking at care providers, both formal and informal, as well as other service providers. So I'm guessing a number of you have been contacted by the vendors that I spoke about earlier to talk about not only reaching out to families in your community, but other service providers, including yourselves, to participate in activities so that we're learning what's working in your community, what's not, what you're identifying as needs as well, to inform that assessment. On the program side, we have used the same foundational documents to inform our definitions around services in the early childhood care and education system, as well as defining related programs and services. The government has really asked us to do a deep dive into these ECCE services with an understanding of how other programs may play into that system. So as we define our ECCE system, we're looking at early care and learning program, which is a host of programs within the Division of Early Care and Learning, as well as the Colorado Department of Education. We're looking at child development services and support, early childhood mental health programming, family strengthening programs, and home visiting programs. Again, we're not discounting the importance of other programs to support children and families. That's why underneath related programs and services, we're still addressing the workforce, Medicaid, WIC, CACFP, other things that we know have an impact on a child and family success, to understand how they play into the ECC system and support families within that. However, we won't be doing as deep of a dive. So as we talk to families and providers, we're not necessarily assessing the need for, let's say, Medicaid services, but we do want to make sure that we're recognizing that that may be a support that we can somehow include in some of our strategies. So thinking like no wrong door, for example, giving providers the opportunity to speak to families about that service. So again, knowing what that connection is, but maybe not fully understanding the need at the end of this project. Are there questions about this? Okay. So engagement and outreach. The table in front of you outlines the current outreach activities that we've committed to. This is not a comprehensive list. As you'll note, we're missing some of the work groups that Stacey Kennedy and her team are forming around credentialing, competencies and qualifications. We are also not seeing the full scope of family surveys or focus groups. And part of that is because those activities are still in development. So what you're seeing right now is largely work being done by our vendors to inform the needs assessment, as well as our analytics contracts. So I'm guessing most of you have heard, again, from the vendors listed in the source and contact column, to help us recruit families, partners, providers, other stakeholders to participate in activities. Last night, yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening, they had the first set of focus groups in Pueblo. We're still waiting on a fairly deep report on that, but it sounds like they went well. They actually are hitting max capacity at a number of focus groups during this first round, so we're really excited about the level of engagement. Again, we'll have another round of focus groups. Those will begin about mid-August and will be sponsored through the strategic planning team. And they'll build on what was done through the needs assessment, but then also be an opportunity for those vendors to start vetting some of the strategies that they're thinking about for the statewide strategic plan. And before I go to the next slide, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has shared information with us so far. Our vendors have been going through existing needs assessments and strategic plans and building frameworks and trying to really understand what exists and what doesn't exist in terms of data. And it's been incredibly helpful as we developed a plan to move forward. So thank you again for your support around that work. Okay. So additional strategies, because of course we're not just doing needs assessment planning and evaluation. Under activity 3, parent choice and knowledge, that's really our communications plan. And so we are kicking off those contracts at the end of this month. And the 2 activities are 1, to refresh the early learning and development guidelines and the communications tools. So we're pretty excited about the opportunity to offer additional materials that will be more user-friendly for parents and informal caregivers. Additionally, we'll be doing the no wrong door strategy. So we're starting to identify providers across all programs within the birth to 5 system, so going broader than the early childhood care and education system, to talk about how they interact with families and have conversations and what works and what doesn't work, so that we can start forming messages that allow families to have a greater awareness of services that may fit their needs and how to connect to those services. Under activity 4, sharing best practices, we've been doing a lot of work, and I think the QRIS team can attest to that. And so we've kicked off the work groups to start looking at early childhood professional competencies, credentials, qualifications, and trying to find greater alignment. We have the ECHRS trainings starting now. We are wrapping up the CCAP contract for slots pilot, so we should have some good information to share from that activity. We have a couple reports out around early childhood mental health that we are reviewing regarding the viability of a 211 early childhood mental health referral line, as well as a service selection tool for community-based organizations to use to meet whatever those local needs are. And then we're also today kicking off ROOTS training, so providing trauma-informed care training to all early childhood mental health specialists and consultants in Colorado. Activity 5, we have not yet hit a point where we have launched those activities, but again, that one will focus on enhancements to the Colorado Shines website, allowing for greater access or greater accessibility to finding providers on the search and making sure the website's ADA compliant. And then also one that doesn't fit neatly into these boxes is our IT strategic plan. And so we're wrapping that up within the next couple weeks, which will inform enhancements and new builds to our IT system to allow us to potentially create or potentially house new data, create better user experiences, better reporting, and just really strengthen the systems that we have in place. Questions about that? You guys are easy. So within all of this, again, I don't think that it's lost on you, the important role you play. And I apologize if it feels like you're getting hit from all angles. If that is happening, you are more than welcome to reach out to me and we can help try to temper some of that outreach, especially through our vendors. But we do really appreciate your support distributing surveys, information about focus groups, and other opportunities to engage within your community. Our first family survey will come out in mid-August. CHI is printing a bunch of what they're calling baseball cards, but they'll have a link to that survey that we'll be reaching out to local organizations for help distributing, in addition to our own staff doing some of that work. You'll be likely asked to participate in stakeholder interviews and to share data. Fortunately, we have a pretty good connect to plans and assessments that you've shared, so we haven't had to make those direct asks. But do know that we are identifying councils in our engagement plan for different activities. So you may hear from SE2 about the No Wrong Door strategy, CHI about what's happening in your local community, or even our strategic planning team to see if they can help test some of those ideas in your community. And then just stay in touch. Our webpage on the Office of Early Childhood website is pretty robust. So we have listed all of our engagement activities and we keep that up to date. So if you ever have a question about an activity or need to contact somebody about it, we have that information available on the website. We also will be posting project updates. So right now we kind of list all of the activities we committed to. And so when I find a few hours or days, I'll be able to get in and do a little more robust information around that. We do present at the Program Quality and Alignment Subcommittee of the ECLC, those meetings every month. Every other month, that meeting is actually dedicated to PDG, so it allows us about 2 hours to really give an in-depth overview of the work we're doing and opportunities to engage. The next meeting will be on October 9th, and it's a webinar only. And so if you go to our website, you'll be able to sign up for that. And if you want to see what we've been doing the last couple months, we do post recordings on the webpage, so you can check in on that. We also have our newsletter and contact information. So if you need anything, again, feel free to reach out to me directly. We also have a PDG email address that you can share with others who may have questions about the work. And that wraps it up.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anyone have any questions for Lindsay? Go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask her directly. Okay, well, we will move right along. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Elizabeth Navarez from our Child Care Resource Referral Call Center. Elizabeth, I've unmuted you. Do you just want to share your slides for about 5 minutes?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for the space.
Great. Let me.
Right.
You have slides, right?
I do. I have our quarterly report that I'd like to share.
Okay, great. I just, you should get a notification to share your screen. Okay, there we go. We can see your screen. And Elizabeth, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Elizabeth, are you there? We can't hear you. We can see your screen though. Okay, well, what Elizabeth's demonstrating is the quarterly report. There's a lot of great information on here and they have a new format, so I will include this in the follow-up email that we send out. That should be coming out to you on Monday. And then if you guys have any questions, you can follow up with your QRIS coordinator or with Elizabeth by email. So we'll move along. Next, we have one of our preschool development grant staff members, and she's never presented to the councils before, at least on our webinar, and that's Kristen Legg, and she will be talking about Senate Bill 63. Hello, Kristen. Hi, Kristen, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, great. And then I do have slides, so I don't know if you can share my screen, show my screen.
Okay, we can see your screen now.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all so much for having me here. My name is Kristen Lang. I am the Coordination and Alignment Manager for Program Access with the PDG unit. But I've also been charged, along with my colleague Amanda Pelletier of the ECLC, with implementation of Senate Bill 63. And that is a bill concerning a strategic action plan to address infant and family child care home shortages in Colorado. So I wanted to come today first to give a little overview of the bill, its history, what the legislation charges us with doing, our plan for implementing it, and then also hopefully have some time to hear your feedback about some of the issues that are called out in the bill, as well as some of the ideas you might have for recommendations to be included in the strategic action plan. So we'll start with an overview. So at the core, this bill requires the Department of Human Services, and that's through our Office of Early Childhood, along with the Early Childhood Leadership Commission and various stakeholders, to draft a strategic action plan addressing the declining availability of family child care homes and infant child care. And that plan is due to the legislature on December 1st, 2019. And this legislation just passed in this past legislative session. And so a little bit of context in terms of why the legislature felt that they needed to address this issue. This map shows the change in the number of licensed family child care homes from 2010 to 2018. And I don't know how well you can see the slide, but you'll see a lot of it is red and a fair amount is orange. And what that red is indicating is a decline over that period of between 50 to 100% of family child care homes in that area. And the orange is a decline of somewhere between 1 and 49.9%. The white indicates that there were no family child care homes. And so what you can see from this map is that in our state, we've seen a pretty precipitous decline in the availability of this type of care. Similarly, this map shows the change in licensed capacity for infants, so infant slots, between 2010 and 2018, so the same time period. Again, that red is showing a decline of between 50 to 100%. The orange is showing a decline of between 1 and 49.9%. We have a couple of bright spots that have had a little bit of an increase, but overall, again, in the state, we're seeing a pretty massive decline in the availability of licensed infant care. And this is concerning, and obviously the two issues somewhat track together. So as we've seen a decline in family child care homes, we've seen a massive decline in infant care slots, so a decline of over 7,300 slots over that time period. That's what that purple line is showing, is infant care available in family child care homes, and the blue line is showing infant care available in center-based care. And so although we've been losing this slot type in family child care homes, we've not been making up for it in center-based care. And so as a colleague of mine likes to say all of the time, where are the babies? And the legislature was, concerned with this issue and felt that it was worthy of study and of creation of a strategic plan for several reasons. One, we know that there are an increasing number of working parents in our state, and they're having to go back to work earlier maybe than in the past. And a lot of folks are working non-traditional hours. And so when you talk about a decline in family child care homes, that often help in those times where centers aren't open or may just be closer for folks in rural communities. The fact that we're seeing that decrease is a concern. And then, of course, we know just in some areas there are no licensed centers and family child care homes were the only option. And if they close down, what do parents do? So overall, what the legislation asks us to do is to study this decline in both of these issues. So they do have some overlap, but the legislation very clearly calls out both studying the decline of family child care homes and separately the decline of infant child care. So also looking at that decline in center-based care, and identify the reasons for these shortages. And in that study and identification process, the legislation calls out a number of different issues to look into. And this is just a summary of those different components, but it asks us to look at the lack of available infant and family child care and that impact that has on families, the obstacles to getting and keeping a family child care home license, reasons why providers stop operating family child care homes, reasons why licensed providers do not provide infant care, whether that's in a home or in a center. They ask us to look at zoning, building tax, other regulatory structures like child care licensing, and how does that affect the ability to offer family child care and infant care, the extent to which programs and investments that we have, things like CCAP, ensure that licensed providers are able to offer quality family child care and infant care. And then finally, what resources do we have available and what might be needed to help family child care homes become licensed and stay in business. So that's just a summary of some of the issues the legislature has asked us to look into. It's a lot. But the idea then is to have a really robust understanding of the problem and create a strategic action plan that, if implemented, would improve the recruitment and retention of family child care homes and available infant care. So this is what the legislature asks of us, and they ask, as we go through this process, to consult with a robust group of stakeholders. And so I won't read these all to you. They're listed on your screen, but it's really everybody who is involved in this issue. So how are we going to do it? Well, this is a general timeline. I'm just going to talk through some more details and leave this up on the screen. So from July to September, one of the key things we'll be doing is gathering data related to those issues that I showed you before. And we're doing this through several different ways. One is through the PDG process. And so as Lindsay was mentioning, all of these surveys are going out, and I know that it must feel overwhelming perhaps to answer the questions, but the data in those surveys will also be used to inform this strategic action plan. We've purposefully embedded questions related to Senate Bill 63 into those surveys. So to the extent you can encourage people to complete them, please emphasize that they will be used in multiple ways to inform our strategic action plan here and also the strategic plan for PDG. In addition to using the PDG process, we will also be using some data we have internal to the office, as well as a few additional vendors to collect data around some of the issues that we don't currently have. The second big thing we'll be working on in that July to September timeframe is getting stakeholder input on those issues and also possible recommendations from stakeholders. And so looking at that big list of stakeholders before, we have decided to go about this in two ways. One is to have meetings. So we've met with the Infant Toddler Task Force of Raise Colorado. Raise Colorado has two events coming up. One is a provider event in Lakewood this Saturday from, I believe it's 8:30 to 11, and then also on this Monday at Mile High United Way from 9 to 11. And hopefully you all have seen those flyers. So that's another meeting we'll be having. We'll be going to present to SubPAC. We're presenting to you today. This is part of that stakeholder engagement process. And then also several meetings through ECLC. But understanding that we cannot get out everywhere in this really short time frame we have to tackle this very big set of issues, we are developing a toolkit for groups around the state to hold their own stakeholder meetings. So as early childhood councils, this could be something that you take on or identify a group within the community that makes sense to organize this type of event. and be able to provide feedback to us via a set tool, so that we can make sure we get geographical representation in our feedback, and are able to do it in the short time that we have. And we will make sure to get that out to you all as soon as that toolkit is finalized, which I would hope would be at the very beginning of next month. So as we do that through July and September, that'll bring us to October, where the goal is that we will have collected all of these great ideas from stakeholders about the issues and their possible recommendations for the strategic action plan. And then a team internal to the office will review this massive list of recommendations, identify those that we can actually implement, those that we have control over, and then create basically a long list. And that long list is going to be pushed out to the same stakeholders who we met through all those meetings and through the toolkits, so that stakeholders can indicate of their level of support for each of this long list of recommendations and their expected impact for each of these recommendations. So we have an idea for this long list, how much support there is, and whether it's going to have a true meaningful impact on the issue. And then after we have that feedback, we're going to collect all of the data, all of the input, the feedback from stakeholders, and take this long list and meet with a small group of stakeholders to come up with a final list of recommendations for inclusion in the strategic plan. And that small group of stakeholders is going to include family child care home providers, center-based provider representation, advocacy organizations who work in this space, parents, representatives from the governor's office, those who work in the building and zoning world, as well as the municipality world, folks in the small business sector, as well as the OEC, the ECLC, and we are going to have a representative from the early childhood councils as part of that small group as well. So that small group will identify that final list of recommendations for inclusion into the strategic action plan. We will give that final list out to stakeholder groups for a final support, don't support designation, so we're able to let the legislature know who's in support of the ultimate plan and who is not. And then in late October, November, we will have each of these recommendations costed out and the entire plan written. That will be done by a vendor and then submitted to the legislature by December 1st, 2019. So lots of work to do. Does anybody have questions on the process before I move into hearing your thoughts on some of the issues?
Remember to unmute yourself if you have questions. And if you're more comfortable being anonymous, you can put them in the chat box or question box.
Yes, I can see those, so I could repeat it and just keep the. Okay. So you can think about it and then. Okay. It looks like there's a question. My understanding, okay, question regarding data. Let me see if I can make this bigger. My understanding is that the number of infants birth 0 to age 1 has decreased over the past decade. Is there any idea on right sizing the number of homes needed? Excellent question. So because we're able to lean on the PDG process, we should know through the needs assessment what that need for infant care looks like, and then hopefully be able to understand what the ideal state or availability of infant care, generally speaking, whether that's through family child care homes or centers, what that would actually be, and then figure out what the gap is and how to address that gap. So yes, right sizing through the PDG process will occur. Okay, and I'm not seeing any other questions. So if somebody else sees other questions and wants to let me know, then that'd be great. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the discussion. So as I mentioned, this meeting is one of our efforts to hear from the stakeholders who are dealing with this issue most often, what the true nature is of the problem, and what are some of the thoughts you have on possible recommendations that would be solutions that we might include in the strategic action plan. And certainly, I think you all probably are very aware of this issue in your own communities. So I'd love to start with just discussing what you all see as hindering the availability of family child care homes. And I put on the screen some buckets that have come out of our other meetings, just as a general guide, but don't feel constrained by these, maybe just to prompt you to think about some of those issues that might affect the availability of family child care homes in your area. Does anyone want to unmute themselves and give your perspective or put it in the chat box?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Nicole Real with Denver's Early Childhood Council.
Hi.
In our experience, definitely all of these are certainly hindering family child care homes in the Denver area. I know your team has, I think, been pretty up to date with what we've been working on in Denver, which has been addressing some of those zoning and international building code issues we have with crazy things like sprinkler systems being required for people and things like that. But we also know too that it's just the economy is making it really difficult, you know, both in terms of the cost of real estate and also people being called into other areas of the workforce where perhaps they can make more money or, you know, can do other things that meet the needs of their families. So we also have a lot of people in Denver who have either retired from the business, and we aren't seeing, of course, the number of people coming into family child care to actually replace the number who are retiring. But we've also had some people who have, we believe, just opted to not remain licensed as well, and have either gone to more of like an informal care setting where they've decided to serve fewer children and forego the licensing and regulatory process. You know, even beyond licensing at the state level, there are a ton of different divisions and entities that they interface with here in Denver. So like in the city and county of Denver, you've got zoning, business, excise and tax, planning and development, fire, public health. There's just tons of different entities they have to interface with. And so it's just a lot of work and time and effort. And for a lot of people, it's either a process they find to be too difficult to navigate, or they just kind of decide that they don't want to go through all of that hassle and they just say, I'll just serve 4 children. So, so that's what we see a lot here in Denver. And, you know, I think we're trying to hold space for this conversation and trying to help certainly as well. I did want to ask though, are you offering any sort of financial stipends or funding to help offset the time of an organization assisting with this effort? So for example, if either a council or perhaps like a family child care home network wants to host something or have a conversation, have you guys set aside funding in addition to the funding going to all of the contractors for this effort to actually help support people's time for these things?
That is not something that we have addressed yet, and I will raise it and ask. So because we are leaning on the PDG process and it was expected that would occur, we're counting on a lot of the focus groups and surveys going out through PDG to kind of to inform Senate Bill 63. And I know that there are gift cards available for families who are participating in that. But in terms of those communities who opt to use the Senate Bill 63 toolkit, I will certainly ask and figure out a mechanism for follow-up, because that's not something we've talked about yet. And it's a good question.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Janine with Chafee, and I just figured out how to unmute, and I sent a written question. We're wondering about the possibility of having 4 children under age 2 in homes where you always have 2 fully trained home providers. We had 2 opportunities that didn't become licensed because it was 2 friends who wanted to go through all the training, etc., and then work from one location. So that would be the location that was licensed. And when they found out they couldn't respond to local needs, which we have severe needs for infant and toddler care, they quit the whole process. And we were told it's by location is the limitation for a home.
Well,
because that would allow.
I'm not. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so I know that there's the infant, toddler, family, child care home license that the state offers, which allows a ratio of 1 to 4 and a max group size of 8. But there can be no more than 4 under 1 year old if there's 2 teachers. So it sounds like that would address the scenario you're proposing. It may be the case that there were additional requirements put on at the local level in some capacity. And so one of the things that we're doing is surveying counties and municipalities to understand some of these rules, because there are so many of them all over, and they vary so much throughout the state. So that's thank you for raising that, and I'm going to put that on my list to make sure that we're really digging into what some of those additional local requirements might be. Does that answer the question?
I really appreciate that, and we were told it was a state requirement, and that I don't have the information in front of me, which I should, that special license you're talking about with 4 under age 2, the max they can have, I think, is 6. So I don't, I apologize, I don't have that in front of me, but we ran into that a couple of times, and it was not a local issue.
It was not, okay.
No, we actually were able to work with county and local governments to make, I guess it's called use by right. If you're licensed, you can have a home child care, period, end of story. In Chafee and Salida and BV.
I think we are, you and I are talking soon, I think. So I want to talk about that. Yeah, well, let's get into that a little bit more, but I've written it down because even if it's the case that maybe licensing rules aren't clearly communicated or consistently communicated, that's another issue that we can look into.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And just for the sake of time, because I don't want to run out of the opportunity to hear some of the solutions, I'm going to, and if you've put things into the question or chat box, I believe we can record that. So let me, go to the next one. Can I hear a couple of voices about the infant care issue? What is it hindering the availability of infant care? And again, this is both family child care homes and center-based care. not seeing anything in chat. And capacity and qualified people, is that for the infant? I'm sorry, I don't know why it's so, I can only see like a very small line of text. Could you, those who put it in the question box? Okay, thank you.
Hi, so this is Nicole again.
Perfect.
So a couple thoughts from our perspective here in Denver, and again, this is specific to our local area, but it is difficult finding workforce oftentimes for infant and infant classrooms, especially because the qualifications are more robust. And in Denver specifically, we actually have quite a few opportunities, grants, stipends, support, etc., available pretty widely to preschool teachers. And so many teaching professionals who I think come into the system into early childhood in Denver actually see a greater incentive to move into preschool classrooms because there's just generally a greater investment being made into preschool age children in classrooms right now. From the business operations perspective as well, infants and toddlers, as many of us know, are kind of considered your loss leaders from a business perspective. I know that's, I hate to call infants loss leaders, but from a business perspective, you really don't make any money on serving infants or toddlers. You make up your margins with preschoolers and school-age children. And in cases where we've seen markets that have had significant investments being made into that preschool area, which of course we've seen in Denver through the Denver preschool program, we have then seen this kind of shift of focus and funding and business models towards the preschool ages. And in cases where community programs are left with perhaps only infant and toddler care to provide to the community, that then is too expensive for them to offer and or ask parents to cover the cost of. And then of course, family child care homes disappearing so quickly are only magnifying that issue. So those are really some of the kind of the top level issues that we've seen with respect to infant and toddler care. And it really boils down to real estate and space. Infants and toddlers need a lot more space. They also have a lot more requirements around egress and exits and things like that. And it's just much more difficult to find and afford real estate and spaces for infant and toddler care. And then, when you add on to that, trying to find the workforce and all of the different economic and business mechanisms going on, it's definitely made it more difficult.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to move quickly because I don't want to run over time. Again, if you can put your thoughts into the question or chat box. If I can't get to them today, I will follow up after this. But possible recommendations, because we don't have a ton of time left, but I just wanted to hear, does anybody, if you could do one thing that could address either the family child care home issue or the infant care issue, what would that one thing be? Something that the state has control over. So we can't change HOA rules, for example, but what could we do?
Can you guys hear me? This is Gretchen.
Yes. Oh.
We're hearing some noise in the background. If, just in the future and for this webinar, if you guys would call in instead of using the audio through your computer, that would be great. The noise is gone though, thank you. And Kristen, if you want another 5 to 10 minutes, that's fine. We had one of our presenters
Oh, really?
cancel. Yep.
Awesome. Yes, I would love that. Gretchen, are you still with us? I think you were trying to say something.
Maybe Gretchen is muted. I can't hear her.
Okay. Anybody else have ideas about possible recommendations we could include in that strategic action plan on either of these issues?
Kristen,
Okay.
this is Monica. Did you want me to read some of the questions, some of the comments that are in the question box?
Yeah, that'd be great because I can't see them for some reason. I can see them like one tiny line at a time, so I can't read the whole thing. So I'm having probably user error. So yes, that would be great.
No worries. So one of our comments is subsidize infant toddler care to make it economically viable, incentives for family child care homes to open up providing them capital improvement funds, materials, funding, more than what they get from their Colorado Shines quality improvement. And then Gretchen said that she was making the noise. So Gretchen, go ahead and type in the question box and we can read out loud.
So far we've got for possible recommendations, subsidize infant toddler care, incentives to open family child care homes.
Oh, Karen and Bodie says higher reimbursement rates.
Through CCAP, Karen?
Yes.
Okay.
Another comment is, it says home specifically focused efforts, regulatory alignment, communication and engagement with family child care homes. They feel most policies, funding streams, models, and communications are developed and shared with the center focus.
Okay.
Change the age of infants to 18 months. And we also have, I think, a tax credit that is provided to families who have their children in child care should be available for providers who care for their own children too.
Okay. Oh, okay, yeah. Interesting.
And someone, Christina Taylor said, I agree that we need to find a way to incentive infant care and child care homes.
Okay. That's a great list. Any other ideas? One thing you could do, or we could do at the state level?
It says, I also wonder why the CCAP rate is less for family child care homes and centers. Homes have a lower ratio and continuity of care. Programs to identify and support high school students to become home providers.
Great idea.
We have another one that says, make being a family home be more appealing, have them become a part of the business world, members of chambers, parent surveys, regular child care parent preferences, survey to assess the changing needs. Oh, Kelly Bowes has something to say. We have another comment. It says, some licensing regulations make it difficult to live in your own house.
On that one, if whomever made that comment, could you give an example, or if you had to pick one that was most difficult for family child care home providers?
This is Emily. If you guys are getting that beeping, if you make sure that your microphones are off on your laptops or computers, that's what's causing the feedback.
Statewide marketing to parents that family child care homes are professionals and not a babysitter. And then in response to the comment about licensing regulations being difficult, one example is that gated areas everywhere. I had a provider say she lives in a gated community. It's inside her house.
Okay. Noted. All right. Maybe like 2 more thoughts and solutions if anything else comes through.
We do have a comment on our about the agenda, and the hardship item is not canceled. We do have that still on the agenda. We were just giving Kristen a few more minutes since this conversation became pretty interactive and she wanted to hear from all the councils.
Okay, and I know that I've overstayed my time, so I appreciate all of the feedback, the opportunity to hear from you all. I do promise to get back with answers to anything I can't see that I can get an answer to, and we'll also make sure to get those toolkits out to you when they are ready for you to hold your own community conversations, perhaps during a council meeting or whatever seems most reasonable for your community. Again, all of the ideas you generated today are going to go into that big long list of stakeholder ideas that will eventually be narrowed down through the process of stakeholder feedback until we have the recommendations for inclusion into the strategic action plan, which will be due to the legislature on December 1st, 2019, and then we certainly hope that our legislature will act upon those recommendations. So thank you again for your time, for your expertise, and for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks.
Okay, we are going to move into hardship, but before that, I want to make an announcement, and I need to share my screen for that. It's regarding the triennial evaluation. Tracy, are you going to present for hardship, or is Emily?
I can launch us and then Tracy can do the walkthrough. Does that work? Tracy's going to have to screen.
Okay. Let me just make myself the presenter again. Just a quick announcement, and everyone can see my screen now. And I'll be sending this form out. So if you're listening by phone and aren't taking notes, don't worry. We're going to email this out. So just to follow up on the triennial evaluation, Stacy Kennedy presented on this last webinar, but you will be contacted sometime tomorrow via email with a doodle poll from Emily or Rebecca. They're evaluators through a CU, and basically they just want to interview you. The interview could take an hour. They will compensate you with a $50 Amazon gift card. It'll be by a doodle poll, so then it'll be via phone. It'll be an interview by phone. So just check your email in the next day or so, answer that doodle poll, and this is, it has the Office of Early Childhood Blessing. They answered the RFP. So if you hear from Emily or Rebecca from CU, just get back to them, answer that doodle poll. And this is part of the ECC triennial evaluation. Okay.
And it's Emily from CU, not me. So.
Yes. Good point. Okay, Tracy, I'm going to send you the screen.
Okay. And while Monica's sending Tracy the screen, I wanted to give a big shout out to Tracy and Bill for helping us figure out this hardship application and how it'll work in EC Connect. So thank you all for your patience. What we're going to do is take your funding streams that you set up for regular Colorado Shines and clone them so you don't have to set up another funding stream. And then what Tracy's going to walk you through is the provider experience applying for a hardship application. So, and after this, we'll just touch base really quick about the capital applications for this year as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. Can everybody
Sure.
Can you see my screen? I have it on. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for your patience as we've been working through getting the application process set up and hopefully good to go so we can avoid issues. But you know, if things come up, we'll go from there and figure it out. But before we get into the application process, I just wanted to go over the several different types of hardship scenarios, types, kind of interchangeable word there, that a program provider might qualify for. This document is it's really just a rough document to speak with here with all of you, but coming soon there'll be more robust documentation, especially like the provider experience and how it looks. So even though what I'm all talking through today, you'll have something document to reference coming here soon. But again, just to kind of go over the hardship types, there's 4 different ones, scenario 1, 2, 3, and 4. Program provider, they may have a level 1, they have a CCAP fiscal agreement in place, they want to earn a level 2, and like all of these, they are experiencing at least one demonstrated hardship. In this case, for scenario type 1, we'll say this provider, they're going to earn 50% of their hardship funding up front and then 50% after they've earned their level 2. May have a provider in the level 2 status. They do not have a CCAP fiscal agreement and they want one. So that kind of buckets them down into scenario 2. Similar to scenario 1, a 50% division there. They have 50% of their reward up front and 50% after they've secured their fiscal agreement. There could be the pathway or route of still a level 2, not having a CCAP fiscal, but wanting to achieve a level 3 to 5. That would be scenario type 3 with the award of 100% upfront. And then finally, could be a provider who already has level 3 through 5, does not have a CCAP fiscal agreement in place, and their current level 3 to 5 rating expires by June 30th of 2020, falling into scenario 4. Like scenario 3, 100% of the award up front. Between scenarios 3 and 4, because they will need to go through the rating process, they have to have rated by June 30th of 2020. Part of the application, which you'll see, I'll demonstrate, will help the provider program think about what month they want to submit their application to rate by so that they can get in the scheduling queue on time and appropriately get scheduled by the assessment team, which we from the EC Connect and Sugar side will communicate with the assessment and ratings to make sure they're aware of programs that may need to be bumped up in the queue, so to speak, so that they can rate on time. And again, all of these are experiencing it. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're doing great. I just want to make sure before you go to the next one, I can say something.
Of course. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No. Okay. So you guys, with scenario 2, we've heard that there are some challenges with county policy around opening CCAP fiscal agreements. So that would be why a program would do scenario 2. Another possibility would be maybe they want some coaching around business practices, or, they want to look into working with somebody around the finance piece so they could see how, if the CCAP rates are different than their rates, then how they could make a business plan to be able to serve families on subsidies. So those are a couple ideas around that scenario two piece. We've heard that there's been some challenges around policy, and so we want to be able to work with our state CCAP team that are our peers to help kind of troubleshoot that. So just putting that out there.
Okay. Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let me put that away for now, and I'm going to go into the hardship application as if I will say we're a provider. You'll notice up here I'm in Bill's child care test. Bill is one of our developers. And presently Bill has a level 5, and he does not have a CCAP fiscal in place. So there's a couple of situations or scenarios types here that he would be able to apply for hardship, assuming his program is experiencing a hardship. So to start off from the provider's view, the quality improvement tab, I would go to the QI incentives. And this is going to pull lots of information over from EC Connect and Sugar to generate the hardship application, and really to help sort through what level a provider has, if they have a CCAP fiscal in place or not, so that it can kind of route them to the appropriate options that they would be able to choose from. This often takes a little bit of time to think because, again, it's connecting with EC Connect and Sugar and pulling lots of stuff over, so have to be a little patient with it, but hopefully here it will be up for us to view and we can move forward.
So one of the things we talked about when developing this application was whether if a program answers the application in a way that would make them not eligible for hardship funding. And I think, Tracy, when you're walking through, we can show them like those pieces, but we're still going to allow them to submit that application because anecdotally we've been told that if we stop the application, then the answer will be changed to make the application go through. So we wanted to make sure that we set this application up, and then that we see it if someone submits it and they're not eligible for whatever reason, that's the opportunity to have your QI navigator reach out to them and say, hey, I see you're really interested in participating in funding. Let's talk about how we can get you there so you're eligible maybe to participate in CSQI funding or talk through what the eligibility pieces are for that one-time hardship funds. And so I just thought I'd throw that out there too before Tracy starts.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so just like CSQI, very similar text will appear to the provider talking about the purpose of quality improvement resources and funding. And what will happen is if the provider program is eligible for hardship, or in this case, Bill's eligible for CSQI also, it will list out those opportunities. Just like with CSQI, the provider program has to select that their information on their program profile, children, classrooms, high needs tabs of their application is current and correct in order to move forward. So in this case, I'm going to say it's good to go and move forward with renewing or applying. And it's just doing a little bit of thinking right now. Okay. All right, so here it's it has HSQI for hardship. This does say 18, but this is a test for test purposes. But I want to go ahead and start my application. Doing a little bit more thinking again, lots of things to think about. Move forward with next. Here you'll see the key contact information, who is the primary contact of the program. Very similar again to CSQI and how that's set up. And the program provider can choose if everything is great or if they'd like to choose somebody else to add their primary contact and go forth with those steps. we're going to say for now that I'm a great contact and move on forward. Here, I'm going to be prompted again to indicate that my Colorado Shines or Bill's Colorado Shines application is up to date. I am going to go ahead and say that it is. And please select the best scenario that describes my current situation. Let's see here. Nope. The hardship should be demonstrating right here. Let's see. Step back here. It was showing us all the hardship types, and it's for some reason it's not right now. So maybe Emily, we can, I don't know if you guys, the team has sent out the hardship types to everybody, but we can follow up maybe with that. I'm not sure if it's even going to let me move forward. It was working, and it demonstrated all the different hardships you could select. There's, what is there, 12 or 11?
Yeah, so there's 11 or 12. So it talks about, children in the program that are experiencing a hardship, whether some examples include a teen parent, domestic violence or, substance abuse, homelessness, or a lot of moves. But anyhow, it's a pretty broad net, and it tracks directly back to what's in the school readiness rules that were passed by the state board in January. And they're also the similar factors that are in the Colorado preschool program. So the odds are really pretty good that most programs will have at least a child experiencing one of those hardships in their program.
Okay. Thanks, Emily.
And
I apologize, it's not listing there.
Yeah, no problem. The other thing is they can check multiple boxes, and they can also check none of the above. And if they check none of the above, then they would still, like I mentioned earlier, be able to go through the application and submit it. But then that would be the conversation that the, grants manager or QI navigator would have, like, well, this funding's really reserved for programs that are serving children that are experiencing some sort of hardship. So if your circumstances change, let me know and we can work with you on this application. So that's that piece.
Perfect. And then, of course, inserting information after you're able to select the hardship types of how the grant will benefit the children experience the hardships identified. Fortunately, it will let me move through. So even though I can't select those hardships, which again, they were there, so they must have went hiding. We'll have to find them. But I have to confirm if I would intend to use the hardship funds to achieve or maintain a higher rating in the case that's where I was choosing to go for on that pathway. On the flip side, if I had selected, if I wanted to go forward with a CCAP fiscal agreement, I'd have that option. So in this case, though, of wanting to go for a higher rating, or maybe say Bill's current level 3 will end before or by June 30th of next year, so I won't need to rate. So here there will be months that demonstrate whatever month I would like to submit my rating application by, and then to describe further how those funds will help to maintain or achieve a higher rating. And moving through that, those are like the main questions that are asked. And let's see, it's still thinking here. Let's see. I should be able to move forward with submitting it. And I think what's getting caught up here is because I can't choose the hardship type. So, but go ahead, Emily. Yeah.
The question was, can you clarify who needs to have a CCAP fiscal agreement? So for hardship only, basically the only programs in your council region who will not be able to see the hardship application will be level 1 programs without a CCAP fiscal agreement. So if the program does not have a fiscal agreement and they either want to open one and choose that scenario, or they plan on achieving a higher submitting to rate, being a level 2, by January 31st, 2020, or they're a level 3 to 5 program whose Colorado Shines rating is expiring on or before June 30th, 2020, then they can apply for these one-time hardship funds. If they are unwilling to rate by June 30th, 2020, in time to have their rating done by June 30th, 2020, then they can still apply for a hardship, but they would not be able to go through and receive the funding because they're not willing to go through that high quality rating in time. The other piece to keep in mind, everybody, is these are one-time funds. They will not be able to apply for hardship funds next year. If they do not qualify for CSQI funding after this, there's no other bites at the apple. So if you're supporting programs that are re-rating or that are going through that high quality rating maybe for the first time, part of the coaching would be how to sustain and be able to maintain high quality rating without funding if they're not going to be eligible for Colorado Shines funds, which is a level 2 or higher with an open CCAP disclosure rating. So keep that in mind too around when around the programs that you're supporting. If they received hardship funding last year, will they see it this year? Tracy, I don't know if you guys been, I don't know if the sugar will block the hardship site, the 9 hardship sites from last year from seeing this. Do you know?
That's my understanding, but I will double check with the development team on that one.
That's one of the reasons we wanted to have hardship be its own funding stream, is it's a lot easier to track and control for that piece. But I think we only had maybe 9 programs last year.
Right.
So.
And I do want to add, once you can submit the application through, what will happen is that the council, and I'll say this again, there will be written instructions for people to follow along, but the council will effectively use one of the actions, the send MOU pending sufficient funds in sugar, and that's going to then notify your program officer, your QRS coordinator, an email to look at the hardship application and to approve it and then move forward from that point. In the case within a council, you identify that there are concerns or issues within the application, you will be able to reopen the application for editing purposes that the program provider can do themselves and then continue through the process.
So I think she's over there too.
And then the other question I have, Tracy, is if and you might have just mentioned this, but if the grant manager says, no, we don't want to go forward with this application, what status should they use?
Okay, yeah. And so I guess what I'll do is I'll backtrack. I should have said this. When it goes through the point of the council wanting it to move forward to their program officer, QRS coordinator, that's going to put them in a waitlist status. But in the case that do not want to take it that far and cancel it, we will communicate the status of what to do with that. I think we're going to put it in a canceled status, but we'll double check on that and have that communicated out too, of where to still keep those records. And obviously, if there's additional outreach that needs to occur with those programs and providers, that can happen too.
That's done. Is it just on? You just hit that green button. It's supposed to be finished now. I thought it was.
Are there any additional questions?
Right.
Or
Tracy, I think it's echoing on your end.
Uh-oh.
Okay, sorry. Do you guys have questions?
So we are out of time. Tracy, did you have anything else to present on the hardship QI, or Emily?
No, that's it. I just thought we could give a quick update on when we expect capital applications to open.
Wonderful.
And we're adding a field that will be required documentation around uploading the insurance and bonding information for the contractor that's selected for cases, you know, of capital improvement requests that are, you know, permanent in nature. We have had our first instance of a contractor disappearing after receiving a deposit. And in that situation, the provider and counsel were able to pursue the bonding company, the bond on that. So that's going to be a new field that's required. I also put together a capital application toolkit that we can send out in the weekly email. It's, you know, a work in progress, you know, so let me know if there's things I can improve about it so that you guys can be supported in having your providers prepare for applying for capital funds.
All right, thank you guys very much. We didn't get to our CSTAT slides, and with our new executive director, now we have kind of a new CSTAT format. We're calling it CSTAT 2.0. It's a little bit more cumbersome when you look at it initially, so we will present on that next month, and we'll send it to you guys, and definitely ask your QRS coordinator if you have any questions. You'll see that it's kind of a large goal, and then it's broken up into some smaller goals. Otherwise, everyone have a great afternoon, and thank you so much for your time. And our next webinar is August 22nd.
Thank you.
I will see you at the picnic.
Yes. I think I'm just going to pick up Andy in a little bit, and then we're bringing over the cornhole. So, but I can't lift it, so I'm going to cut it out. Like, okay. I'm not on. Oh. I'm looking for how to hear us. Are you totally disconnected on everything? Because I just saw you talking about picking up Andy. I just heard you picking up. Oh, I shouldn't be, but
I had my
you had your phone on
speaker and then